Thank you. Well, welcome. I heard how extraordinarily busy the law students are over lunch, and how challenging it is to find this kind of time. So I really appreciate those of you who made time and those faculty who also made time. And I'm delighted to be here. Thank you. This is a newer integration for me, is looking at how mindfulness applies to law. And as I've been delving more into this, I've been really inspired to focus more of my attention here, because I see both how needed it is and also how healing it can be to integrate mindfulness. So I'm appreciative of Charlie for inviting me, and Jen, thank you for the introduction. And I just want to take a moment to acknowledge Charlie and also some of my teachers. I think it's important to just take a moment to pause before we begin. So Jack Cornfield, John Kabat-Zinn, Roger Walsh, Shinzen Young, and then my grandparents are up here, Benedict and Nancy Friedman, because honestly they taught me more about mindfulness than any of my Buddhist meditation teachers. And I just want to invite you all, if you don't mind, to close your eyes for just a moment and just think of someone who's touched your life, someone who you feel grateful for, a teacher, a mentor, a grandparent. You're just calling them into your mind and silently thanking them. Notice how it feels to do this. And you can open your eyes. For how many people was that a relatively positive experience to do? Okay, so just about everybody. I like to start by some kind of exercise in all of my teaching that brings us into a positive state and also calms the mind. Because what we know in the scientific literature is that when you're in a relatively positive, calm mood, you learn better, you retain the information better, you're better able to integrate it. And so it's helpful to kind of pause before we begin any kind of learning or any kind of training and see what kind of landscape we're inviting it into, what kind of interior. So another piece that I think is important before we begin is to reflect on your intention for being here. Our lives are so much on automatic pilot. And so just pausing and reflecting on, why am I here? You're all very, very busy. Why are you here? What is your intention for learning about mindfulness? Okay, so just pausing and reflecting on that. And I'm also reflecting on why I'm here, and what comes to me is really that this be of benefit in some way, in some small way, that it touches your life or the people who you're going to touch at some point in your work. What I'd like to cover in the short 45 minutes that I have is way too much, but we'll see what we can do. One is, most important, I want to give you an experience of what mindfulness is. I'm sure all of you know a little bit about mindfulness, and so my invitation is to approach this as if you've never heard about it before, with what's called a beginner's mind. And just listen as if it's the first time. Then I'll talk a bit about the science, and is mindfulness helpful? How is it helpful? And I'll introduce some of the research on neuroplasticity in the brain. And then I won't be focusing on integrating mindfulness in the law, because I spoke with Charlie at lunch, and it sounds like that's what you're going to get later on in your courses. But I'll just touch upon it. But for today, I really want to have you experience mindfulness, and then also see the importance of it in terms of the scientific literature. The last thing I'm going to touch on is self-care and self-compassion. This is an essential part of any kind of healthy profession, and I see the legal profession as, at the deepest level, meant to help. So I want to touch on that. Okay, so mindfulness has its roots in Buddhism, as many of you know. However, we teach it as a universal practice. So Western medicine and psychology, Western law, in integrating mindfulness, it's really offered as a universal practice and something that transcends religion or culture. Most important, I want to emphasize that mindfulness isn't just a meditation technique. It's really a way of being in the world. Okay? So what I'll be teaching today, I will teach a little bit of meditation as a technique, but mindfulness is a way of living your life. Mindfulness is a state of presence that occurs when we're in the present moment. Welcome. Okay. So the word mindfulness actually means to see clearly. For how many of you is that surprising? Do you know? Yeah, we think of mindfulness as about relaxation or stress management. The word actually means to see clearly. To see clearly what's true in this moment. So you might notice for yourself, what's true in this moment? What does it feel like in your body? What thoughts are going through your mind? Especially if you just came in, you'll notice a lot going through your body. So part of mindfulness is learning how to see clearly what's true in this moment. And what we notice as we start to pay attention is that most of the time we're not fully here. We're in the future thinking about what we have to do and what we have to get done. Or we're in the past thinking about what we should have done or what we could have done. A lot of our stress and a lot of our resources and energy go into a future that doesn't exist yet, or into a past that's already gone. So mindfulness is about bringing our awareness into this moment and seeing clearly what's true right now. Okay. The formal definition, this is from our book, is that mindfulness is the awareness that arises when we intentionally pay attention in an open, accepting, and discerning way. Okay, so basically mindfulness is just this awareness. And yet there's 3 parts that are really important to it. So I want to talk a bit about each of these. Intention, attention, and attitude. So intention is basically knowing why we're doing what we're doing. Okay, so as I had you reflect, what is your intention for being here? Welcome, you're fine. So what is your intention? With mindfulness, we begin with intention. The second element of mindfulness is attention, paying attention in the present moment. And the third element is how you pay attention. What is your attitude? Is it open? Is it curious? Or is it judgmental? Okay. So I'm going to talk about each of these so you really get a feel for what mindfulness is. Intention, I think, is expressed beautifully by Jon Kabat-Zinn. He says, your intentions set the stage for what is possible. They remind you from moment to moment of why you are practicing or why you're paying attention. I used to think meditation practice was so powerful that as long as you did it at all, you would see growth and change. But time has taught me that some kind of personal vision is necessary. Okay? Simply knowing why. Otherwise, even your meditation practice can become just one more thing that you do. Okay. I think it's most beautifully put by Suzuki Roshi. He says, the most important thing is to remember the most important thing. Right? That's it. Why am I doing what I'm doing? We forget. What's the most important thing? All of a sudden you're in law school and the most important thing might be getting a good grade on this test. But at the deepest level, what's the most important thing? For myself, this brings me back all the time. Because we get lost. We get lost so easily. We forget what is most important in our lives. Why am I doing what I'm doing? Your intention helps redirect. It helps reset your compass. Oh yeah, this is where I want to head. This is where I want to go. This is why I'm doing what I'm doing. Okay. So intention is the first element of mindfulness. The second element is attention. This is simply bringing our attention into the present moment. And what you notice is it's kind of hard to do. Right? So I've been talking now for 6 minutes. How many people have noticed that your mind has wandered off? Come on, everyone. Right? Welcome. Isn't that extraordinary? So for the next 3 minutes, you can play in this game too. For the next 3 minutes, see if you can focus your attention right here, because you're already here. This is where you are, right? Focus your attention here for just 3 minutes and see if you can stay with me. Now, the reason I'm not surprised that your mind has wandered and that I don't take it personally is because it's what the mind does. It's referred to as monkey mind. It's just kind of swinging from thought to thought like a monkey swings from limb to limb. So actually training our mind in how to be here is new for it. It's a skill that you're developing. What happens though is when our mind, you're doing great by the way, you have about 2 minutes left. When the mind goes into the future, right, we're not here. When the mind goes into the past, we're not here. And so it's hard to see clearly, right? Remember the word mindfulness means to see clearly. It's hard to see clearly when you aren't fully present. There's this beautiful quote from Dr. Germer. He says, "An unstable mind is like an unstable camera. We get a fuzzy picture." Our goal is to see clearly what's true. If you think about it, about 35 seconds left. You're still doing great. I can feel the room's different though. Can you feel that? And I know some of you have wandered off already, and that's okay. There's no judgment. But notice. But what I find really interesting is all of your bodies are still here, right? No one's left the room. So you're all physically sitting here, and yet your minds aren't here. So there's this kind of empty shell. There's something incredibly powerful when you bring all of your presence, your mind, your attention, your body into one place. And you gather all your resources. That's who I want representing me, right? That's who I want as a lawyer, a therapist, a physician, a husband, a mother, a friend, someone who's fully here, okay? So we bring our attention into the present moment. You did great. You want to try it again for 2 more minutes? Just staying here. You're already here, you might as well. Okay. So what we notice when we start to pay attention is we start to get a little bit tense because we're like, ooh, I really got to pay attention. And actually what Western science has taught us thus far is that to really kind of have that clarity and rigor and adrenaline, we need to be a little stressed to really be able to pay attention, right? So if you're studying, you're like, oh, well, I need to be amped up. If I relax, I'm not going to get it all done. That's actually not true. What we found is that there's different pathways of attention and that there is a state of consciousness called a relaxed alertness where your body can be totally at ease. You don't have to, have high blood pressure and eventually cardiovascular disease. Your body can be totally at ease and yet you can be super clear, have an extraordinary razor-like clarity. So this is a new skill and a new state of consciousness where we're learning how to relax our body and also be right here. You with me? Okay. So that's the second element of mindfulness is attention. The third element of mindfulness, this is the last one, is your attitude. It's how you pay attention. What you start to notice as you bring your attention in the present moment is that we're constantly judging. We're constantly evaluating. They should be coming in late, they shouldn't be coming in late, whatever it is. Welcome, you're totally welcome in here. With mindfulness, what we try to do is have a completely open, non-judgmental attitude so that we can see clearly instead of making these automatic reaction judgments where we put people in a box or put our experience in a box. We actually open and just say, well, what's happening right now? We're curious, we're interested, we're open. We're actually kind with our experience. What does it feel like to walk in right now? Notice it without judging it. Opening to our experience. When I was first learning to meditate, I was 19 or 20 and I was in Thailand and I didn't know very much about meditation. I actually was there just traveling with a friend and somehow ended up at a monastery. And the head monk didn't speak any English, and I didn't speak any Thai, except for Swadika, which I love. I love the Thai people and their language. But what I understood is that I was supposed to pay attention in the present moment and feel my breath go in and out of my nose. Okay, so you might want to try that with me. Just see if you can stay here and feel your breath. What I noticed, just as you'll probably notice, is that it's hard. And that my mind wandered off a lot. And I started getting more and more frustrated, like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I pay attention? I just, it must have been when I was 20, because I just finished college early. I'd graduated summa cum laude from Duke University and basically my mind had done what I wanted it to do my whole life. I felt like I had pretty good control, and I couldn't meditate. And I started getting more and more frustrated, more and more judgmental, more and more anxious, more and more agitated. I was like, what is wrong with you, Shauna? Why can't you do this? And by day 4, it was a 12-day silent retreat. Not only did I not like myself, I didn't really like anyone else there either. I was like, what's wrong with them? Why are they just sitting here? And it's hot and you're uncomfortable. So this monk from London came, and I said, can I please have an interview with him? I just need to talk to someone in English. So I asked him, I said, here's what's happening to me. Am I doing this right? And he looked at me, he's like, oh no, sweetheart, you're not practicing mindfulness. You're practicing judgmentalness, frustration, striving, agitation, impatience. He said, what you practice gets stronger. It's not just about paying attention, it's how you pay attention. What we know in neuroscience now with neuroplasticity is that what we practice gets stronger. Our repeated experiences shape our brain. If I'm practicing judgmentalness and striving and anxiety, it's just getting stronger in me. So what I love about mindfulness, and what is often overlooked, especially in academia, and which is why I've really devoted my career to defining mindfulness in this nuanced way, is that how you pay attention is essential. It's not just about paying attention. Can I pay attention with curiosity and kindness and this welcoming, like, oh, interesting, that's what it feels like to be nervous. Huh. Or how curious, that's what anxiety feels like. Or fear, or doubt, or sadness. That these experiences aren't to be pushed away. We open to them. Just like a parent tending to a small child. You say, oh, I want to know what happened. You fell down. Okay? So this is how we pay attention. The beginner's mind quality, this attitude, is what I love most. This is my son, Jackson. And there's this sense of like total wonder of like, wow, a camera. That's his face. He was 6 months old. He didn't really know. He's just like, oh. That's how we practice mindfulness. It's like, what does it feel like to sit in this room right now? Where are my feet? Where's my breath? What thoughts are in my mind? Am I tired? Am I interested? Am I excited? Am I bored? It doesn't really matter what you are. What matters is that you're open to it. And you're actually curious about, what does it feel like right now to be in this body? What does it feel like? This is what it means to be alive, right? This is it. So this beginner's mind, and what this has done for me is there's this sense of permission. I can feel whatever I'm feeling, and it's okay. It's okay, because really all I want to do is learn how to be curious about it and kind to myself. Okay? Good. So what I'd like to do is take you through an experience of mindfulness. Because really, mindfulness is just about tending to our experience and allowing our experience to arise and pass away. Okay, so let me do this. I'm going to get a chair and just sit with you. You can go ahead and put your pens and papers down and just sit in a comfortable position. And let's make sure you can all hear me. These are great. And just allow your eyes to close if it feels comfortable. You can keep them open and look at the floor if that feels better to you. But it's helpful to begin by focusing inward and not being distracted. You'll have more than enough distractions, you'll see. And just begin, you can move your body in any way you need to find a comfortable, relaxed, yet present seated position. Take a moment to just feel your feet, feel both legs, feel your seat in the chair, your spine straight and upright, shoulders relaxed. Feel both arms and your hands, your belly, your chest, your throat. Feel your face and just relax your jaw, your eyes, your forehead. Feel the back of your head and the back of your neck. And just get a sense of your whole body sitting. And notice that you're breathing. And not trying to change the breath or control it. See if you can just feel it. Feel the breath as it naturally flows in and out of the body. And so we'll intentionally, on purpose, pay attention in the present moment to whatever's here. We'll use the breath as our anchor so that anytime your mind wanders off, you just come right back to the breath. It's always here, always a support to the present moment. And so just relaxing and opening, being curious about your experience, curious about any emotions or thoughts or sounds or physical body sensations, feeling them, opening to them, and then letting them go. Noticing where the mind is, and always returning to the breath. Cultivating our capacity to be present, to see clearly what's here, what it feels like to be alive right now. Returning again and again, and actually being curious, interested, caring about your experience. Knowing that what you practice becomes stronger So really feeling the goodness of this practice and how you're taking care of yourself by just being present. Just allowing yourself to rest in this moment. Last minute of this practice, inviting in an intention. Why are you practicing? What is your intention? It could simply be to be present or to stay open and welcoming of experience, to relax or rest, whatever is true for you, just bringing that into your awareness. And then taking a moment to notice how you feel. Perhaps notice if it's any different than when you walked into the room 20 minutes ago. And perhaps making an intention to bring a piece of this presence, this awareness, with you. As you slowly let some light back in through the eyes and just bring some movement back into the body. You can move your fingers and toes, stretch your arms. And as the formal meditation practice ends, notice that you're still breathing, you're still paying attention, right? Nothing actually needs to change. The mindfulness is still here. And so bringing a continuity of awareness, right? The meditation ends, but the mindfulness is still here. We're still intentionally paying attention in a kind, curious way. Okay, good. So just turning to one person next to you and just say one thing that you noticed. We'll take 30 seconds to do this. One thing you noticed. And as you're ready, coming back to the larger group. As you're ready, coming back to the larger group. So what did people notice? What did you notice? Anyone can share.
Not getting comfortable in the chair. Like just, I'm a little short, sitting in it and having my feet flat, but then just making it work in the seat.
Good noticing. So what we do is we notice, oh, I'm not quite comfortable. And then you can either move or you can say, how does it feel to be uncomfortable? Because my guess is there's other parts of life that are uncomfortable too. So it's learning how to be with discomfort in this unique way, which is to actually welcome, to actually be curious about it instead of immediately trying to fix it. Okay, great. What else? Yeah.
Do you
think for me it's the other way around. I'm actually really comfortable meditating for the most part, for short periods of time, and I have this feeling like, wow, I wish it would just stay like this, quiet and peaceful inside of me, and then I don't want to go back into
Great noticing. So for you, it's relatively easy to get calm and peaceful, and then there's a certain attachment that comes with
I
like,
want to stay there.
I don't want to end, I don't want to go back. So that's really good noticing too. And then you bring this same kind curiosity to the attachment. Because my guess is that's not comfortable. Even though there's a peace and ease, when you start to grasp onto it, it becomes uncomfortable. And then you be curious about that. How does that feel? Great. What else? Yes?
This may be leaving the now, but I admit that I thought of some beautiful music that I heard at Chapel of the Chimes accidentally. So I could hear the music rise up.
Beautiful.
And
So,
that was all, I was surrounded by the music.
and so with mindfulness, we notice the experience of that because that's what's true in the present moment.
Mhm.
And then as best we can, we let it go and come back to right
Mhm.
here. A lot of people ask, they're like, well, I got pulled away into this beautiful fantasy, but the fantasy was very healthy and I felt relaxed and calm. Can't I just stay there? And there's other practices where that's wonderful and that's healing for you. But with mindfulness, what we're trying to learn how to do is to actually be here and to actually practice that so that those neural pathways are strengthened. Yeah, great. So I'm going to move on. I could stay here for actually the next hour and really talk about your experiences, which I love to do. But what I want to do is, one, make this last point about the fact that mindfulness is not just about meditation, okay? Mindfulness is a way of being. And so sometimes this is referred to as the formal and informal practice. Formal practice is the meditation. Informal practice is bringing mindfulness into every moment, right? So bringing mindfulness into listening right now. Intentionally paying attention in a kind, curious way. It's my favorite audience. Bringing mindfulness into the classroom, into studying, to actually listening and learning and being fully present. So I want to talk a little bit about the science. Is mindfulness helpful? Because I'm short on time. Yes. Is that okay, Charlie? No, I'll go a little bit more into it. As Charlie and Jen said, I am a scientist and a professor as well as a clinical psychologist. And I've been really interested for the past 15 years exploring how is mindfulness helpful? I know in my own life personally it's had some significant and really profound effects, but I was curious, what is the impact for other people and who is it most helpful for and in what ways? I don't want to just believe that my own experience generalizes out to all of you. So I've been studying. And what we found in the past about 40 years of research is that mindfulness has significant effects on our physical and psychological health. So here I've just listed some of them. Has significant effects on psoriasis, chronic pain, fibromyalgia, cancer, tension headaches. It also has significant impact on reducing depression, anxiety, panic attacks, insomnia, binge eating disorder. It's actually quite remarkable. If you look at the medical model, typically you have one intervention for one illness. So if I have cardiovascular disease, my doctor will give me a very different medication than if I have cancer, right? What we're seeing with mindfulness is that its impact is very wide-ranging, and that there's something extraordinarily healing in this practice that's impacting the whole system across a wide array of illnesses, which I think is very interesting. And there's some mechanisms of action physiologically that we can talk about maybe after, or you can read the book, but about why this is. But I think it's important just to know that. What's got me really interested though in the past 5 years is the recognition that mindfulness meditation wasn't developed to reduce cardiovascular disease or panic attacks, right? The original intentions of meditation practice was definitely to reduce suffering, but also to cultivate our capacities for compassion, for presence, for well-being, and for helping others. And so I just want to share a little bit of the research that has looked at the impact of mindfulness and meditation on self-actualization, our capacity to reach our potentials. Self-efficacy, the sense that we can actually do something. Self-efficacy is the best predictor of change of anything else. If you want someone to make a behavior change, whether it be stopping smoking or studying with better habits, the best predictor of whether or not they're able to do that is whether or not they believe they're able to. Self-efficacy. It's been shown to increase happiness, sense of control, a sense of spirituality or connectedness, empathy, that mildly important quality for human relationship, moral development, another relatively important one. It's been shown to also have an impact on our cognitive capacities. It's been shown to increase attention, which makes sense, you're practicing paying attention, to increase concentration, to increase problem solving, memory, academic performance. I always like to tell that in law schools, academic performance, meditate. One of my favorite studies just came out this year, or last year I guess. It reduces cognitive rigidity. So what basically cognitive rigidity is kind of getting stuck in fixed views. What mindfulness does is kind of like with beginner's mind, it opens us up to see things differently and freshly. And they did this great study where they had meditators and non-meditators. They had to figure out how to get water from like 6 different jars into one jar. And it actually required a really complex mathematical equation. So who do you think did better, the meditators or the non-meditators? The same. They actually did the same. Meditators are not smarter than non-meditators. However, they did a second test, and they said, now you have to get it into these 3 jars. And the 3-jar test actually required a very simple mathematical equation. Who do you think did better, the meditator or the non-meditator group?
Meditative.
Yes, because what happened was the non-meditators kept trying to use the really complex mathematical equation that they had just learned to do the other task. The meditators saw it freshly, and they said, oh, what's needed here? Okay, so this cognitive flexibility, I think, is extraordinarily important, especially in law. And then another very important one is ethical decision making. We just did this study last year, and we taught mindfulness to undergraduates and then looked at their ethical decision making, and their behaviors became significantly more ethical after taking just a 7-week mindfulness class. Okay, so some of the most exciting research, I believe, is the new research on meditation in the brain. This is a picture from National Geographic. This is a Tibetan Lama hooked up to our EEG monitor so we can see what's happening in his brain when he meditates. And what's really interesting, and I just want to give you a little background information, is that positive and negative emotions look different in the brain. So if you look at someone's brain and you look at the kind of the activity in the brain, not their structure, but their activity, what you find is that when you're in a relatively happy or alert or positive state, you have higher left to right ratio of activity in your prefrontal cortex. So your prefrontal cortex is this front part of the brain. It's not right and left hemispheres. It's just the prefrontal cortical activity. And you have higher right to left when you're depressed or anxious or, in fact, people who have clinical depression, anxiety, or post-traumatic stress disorder have significantly higher right to left ratios in this part of the brain. So that's interesting. We have a signature of what positive and negative emotions look like in everyone's brain, not just meditating brains. So what they did is they had 175 people come into the laboratory to look at these differences. And then they had this Tibetan Lama come in. And what they found is that his left to right ratio was significantly higher than anyone else's. And they said, this is extraordinary. And then when he meditated on compassion, it got even higher. So they said, is this just a random artifact? Like, was he born happy and then he decided to go off and study meditation? Or is it because he's practiced for tens of thousands of hours? So they did the gold standard in Western science, which is a randomized controlled trial, and they decided to teach biotechnology employees. They felt like if they could learn to meditate, anyone can. That didn't work very well when I was down in the South Bay doing a presentation. So what they found is that in just, they did a 4-month follow-up, and what they found is that, as in past research, positive emotions increased, negative emotions decreased. But what was really extraordinary is they found a significant increase in left-sided prefrontal activation in the meditating group. That in 4 months, they had completely shifted the activity in their brain towards greater wellness, happiness, alertness, presence. This research is actually, the implications are very hopeful and very exciting. In psychology, there's something called a happiness set point. And it's just like with weight, you kind of have a certain set point and you can go either way, about 10 pounds, but other than that, it gets pretty hard. What we found in psychology, which I remember when I first read about it, I couldn't believe it was true, is that if you win the lottery or you're in a terrible accident and become a paraplegic, within 1 year, you go back to your baseline level of happiness. So you have an initial dip in the direction expected, and then within 1 year, you're back to baseline. So this is great news if you're born happy, right? Doesn't matter, like, you get in an accident, you get divorced, you're like a Bobo doll, you know, life knocks you down, you pop back up. But for most of the people that I work with, they weren't born happy, right? These are the people who are suffering a lot in this life. And it was pretty pessimistic news. It was like, even if you win the lottery, even if you marry the perfect person or get the house in Hawaii, within 1 year, you're gonna go back to being depressed. You have a set point. So I always tried to reconcile this, you know, for myself going into graduate school, getting my PhD in clinical psychology. I was kind of like, well, how can we help? What this research shows is that changing our external circumstances doesn't significantly shift our level of happiness, but changing our interior landscape does, right? Through training the mind, through mindfulness, and through many, many other practices. But what this research shows is that just as the monk told me so long ago, what we practice becomes stronger. What we practice becomes stronger. Richie Davidson, who is the principal investigator of this study, he says, happiness can be trained because the very structure of our brain can be modified. So what's he referring to here? The structure of our brain can be modified. So this is called neuroplasticity, which has become kind of the new buzzword in science. And basically, what we found is that our experience matters, that our repeated experience shapes our brain. So if you look at taxi drivers, the parts of their brain that have to do with visual, spatial, and mapping are extraordinarily developed. They've had cortical thickening, which means their cells grow and get stronger in those areas. In meditation participants, what we find is that the areas of their brain that have to do with reflection, emotional intelligence, compassion, presence, concentration, those parts get thicker. What we practice gets stronger, right? It makes sense. If I'm lifting weights, my arm's going to get stronger. If I'm cultivating my capacity to be present, that gets stronger. What I find very encouraging, being a mom and a professor and not being a monk, is that they found these changes in everyone's brains. That this wasn't just in the people who were meditating for tens of thousands of hours in the Himalayas. These were people with jobs, with families, who were meditating on average 40 minutes a day. So it is an optimistic message, which is basically that mindfulness can change both the activity in our brain and also the structure. Okay, can I have 5 more minutes? Thank you. So I believe that integrating mindfulness into the legal profession, it can be extraordinarily healing, both for lawyers and also for the people who they work with. And I just wanted to, there's that wonderful conference that I spoke at a few years ago called The Mindful Lawyer. And it gave me this idea of saying, well, mindfulness can help by creating a mindful lawyer. So first, mindfulness increases attention, which is necessary for the law. One of the studies that I think was the best study that came out last year was a study on multitasking. What they found is that when you multitask, you make 1/3 more errors, and it takes you twice as long. Okay, Let me repeat that. A third more airs, it takes you twice as long. Okay, so there's no reason to do it in terms of being efficient, which is the kind of rationale. Then they found that it releases stress hormones and cortisol into the body, so it's bad for you. Okay, so there's no reason to do it for your health. And then they found that you feel less satisfied and more exhausted afterwards. So on every dimension that you could possibly think of, multitasking is not helpful. And yet we all do it. So one thing mindfulness does is it helps us be more present, pay attention, which I think is essential in law. It increases empathy and self-compassion. These are the most predictive, empathy is the most predictive of success in terms of any kind of relationship, professional, business relationship, or a marriage relationship, friend relationship. These are essential. As I said before, mindfulness increases cognitive flexibility and problem solving, also essential for the law. And finally, it increases our ability to regulate emotion, our ability to be with strong emotions and regulate them. In this profession, there are strong emotions. There's a lot of stress. Being able to be present for those and regulate them in the moment is essential. So as I was reflecting and looking at kind of my day, and I do a lot of work with physicians, and I was thinking about 7 practices that you could bring into your day. This is what I came up with. One is to begin the day with intention. What's your intention for the day? And then throughout the day to identify your intention. So I was meeting Charlie for lunch, and as I was driving over here, I really paused for a moment. I was like, what's my intention? And it was honestly just to see him and connect, but to know that, oh yeah, instead of getting distracted. What's my intention? What's my intention for a phone call or a business meeting? I don't do this all the time, but for important things, I pause, and it completely shifts the entire experience. I also set my, my phone with a little bell that rings every hour. So, it's on silent a lot, so I don't always hear it, but when it rings, I simply pause, remember my intention, feel my breath. It takes a moment. Throughout the day, practice really listening. Mindful listening is one of the best practices that you can have, and especially in this profession, to really listen. It saves so much time. It's much more efficient to actually hear someone the first time. To attend to the body and really listen to the messages. We didn't talk a lot about that, but often when I'm teaching, I focus a lot on somatic experience, because that's where our emotions reside, and that's where a lot of our innate wisdom and intuition reside. Mindful speaking is extraordinarily important, bringing consciousness and intention to your speech. And then most important, I believe, are these last 2, which is one at the end of the day to reflect on what happened and what needs attention, and then let it go, right? Write it down, let it go. And then to take a moment of gratitude for all that you've offered and given and done, and for the people who you've worked with and interacted with. The gratitude I only entered in about a year ago, and in my own life, it's amazing how just ending the day with that sense of gratitude and appreciation shifts things, no matter how exhausted I am. Okay. So what I want to leave you with is what my supervisor taught me when I was first working at the Veterans Hospital, which is the heart pumps blood to itself first before pumping blood out to the rest of the body. And if it didn't, the heart would die, and then the rest of the body would die. I think what often happens is we forget to pump blood to ourselves first. There's this way where we're kind of constantly pushing ourselves, constantly judging ourselves, and feeling like we don't quite measure up, like we're somehow not okay or haven't quite figured it out. Is this making sense to you all? Anyone know what I'm talking about? Yeah. I remember Tara Brock, who's one of my dear teachers. We were in a room with 800 people presenting at a conference in Seattle, and she asked, how many people know what I'm talking about when I talk about this kind of constant sense of self-judgment, or sense of I'm not okay, or I should be better? And in this room, 799 people raised their hands. And I was sitting with Sylvia Borstein next to me. The 3 of us had been presenting. And Sylvia was just sitting there like this. She's kind of like the grandmother of meditation in the West. And she was just sitting there, do-do-do, and I'm like, you don't feel that way, Sylvia? And she's like, no, I love myself. And I was so excited. I was like, wow, it really like you just keep meditating, you learn how to be kind to yourself. This sense of self-compassion. So this is, if you can sit quietly after difficult news, if in financial downturns you remain perfectly calm, if you see your neighbors travel to favorite places without a tinge of jealousy and can happily eat whatever is put on your plate, if you can love everyone around you unconditionally, and can always find contentment just where you are probably a dog. Right. Well, we know that experience of holding ourselves to these standards of like, I should be this way. And there's something so liberating about this practice of allowing yourself to be as you are. And it doesn't mean you're perfect, and it doesn't mean there aren't areas for growth and change, but to actually have this fundamental sense of compassion for yourself, and kindness and care, and to begin to see things clearly, to see clearly what's needed instead of automatically going into judgment. So learning to hold ourselves in compassion. The word compassion in Tibetan includes oneself. It's considered incomplete if it doesn't include yourself. For me, that's been one of the most healing dimensions of mindfulness. One is learning how to be present and to actually be alive in my life. And then the second is learning how to hold myself and my experience with compassion. Okay. So I want to thank you for your kind attention. I think I made it perfectly. And I know, Charlie, you had some ideas about questions and answers. Did you want me to just open it up to that, or did you want to facilitate it?
I would like Jen to facilitate it.
Jen will facilitate it. So thank you for your kind attention. Yeah, come on up.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Charlie had asked me just to take a couple minutes maybe to even talk a little bit more about the lawyer's experience and sort of what came to me through your talk. And I just am so struck not just by the capacity to increase attention and creativity and those things, but really struck by the capacity for improved interpersonal relationships.
Yeah.
For me, like thinking about a time when I was working with someone on a pro bono case and they came to a hearing smelling like beer, like they just smelled, and like at the time I wasn't practicing mindfulness, and I saw so much judgment. I mean, now looking back, I can see all the judgments I made that might have been completely incorrect. Like that this person, you know, at the time I was like, they can't even care enough about their life to show up here without having, you know, had a drink at 9 o'clock in the morning. Like, and really looking back, this person probably cared so much and was so nervous about that meeting that that was their coping skill. And at the time, you know, looking back, I can have compassion for myself, but also so much more compassion for them.
Yeah. I mean, I think this practice is about seeing clearly and seeing with discernment. So there's compassion, and yet there's also discernment. That what I want to emphasize is there's this sense of accepting what is, because that's how it is. It's not because you want it to be that way. You didn't want him to show up smelling like beer. So the acceptance isn't like, oh yeah, go ahead and do that next time too, no problem. The acceptance is, this is what's true in this moment. How do I respond? And that's where the compassion comes in. And that's where the seeing clearly is, where you see, oh, he cares so much, he's so nervous. And how do I be discerning and say, with great wisdom and great kindness, this is not going to help you in what you're wanting. Yeah, great. And I do believe that interpersonal dimension is one of the ways mindfulness can really serve.
Does anyone else have questions?
About anything. Yeah, go ahead.
So on the interpersonal dimension topic, I guess I'm curious, what do we do in situations where we're working with other people whose all nervousness and all kinds of stuff is just kind of taking over, and obviously I don't have control over their emotions, I only have control over my emotions, I can do the best I can to stay balanced and centered in that situation. But I think in law school, there's a lot of rubbing off that happens.
Yeah.
There's a certain hype that just kind of feels like it
Emotions
just
are
takes over.
contagious, absolutely. I mean, they said our emotions are, I forget, it's like 0.3 milliseconds or something that we feel someone else's emotions before we can cognitively even know it. So one of the ways is to stay centered in yourself and learn how to regulate your own emotions, because you're exactly right. You can't control their emotions. But what I've noticed is that if I can regulate my own emotions and just stay kind of grounded in my own body, I'm influencing them too, right? My emotions are contagious toward them. So especially for me in doing clinical, work and psychotherapy, there's a lot of strong emotions coming from over here. And what I find is I can actually help them regulate by regulating myself. Okay? And not worrying about it. Say, oh, I noticed they're really anxious, and oh, I notice it's impacting me, and wow, that's interesting. That's just what's happening. Yeah, great question. What else? You have one.
Not me. It's a really technical question. Yeah. You talked about it's about the brain. So you talked about left hemisphere processing, left prefrontal cortex.
Right, not left
specifically.
hemisphere.
Right.
Yeah.
More specifically, you're referring to the left medial prefrontal cortex, right? Not
Right.
Okay. Because that big study came out in 2007, Barb et al., about how mindfulness trains the brain to shift medial prefrontal functioning to
Right.
the side. Okay, cool.
You're
Just wanna make sure I had that
100% right.
Okay.
And when I'm speaking in law audiences, that I felt like
Exactly,
even
yeah.
going into
Yeah,
prefrontal
that's what I
cortex
wanna
was
ask.
enough.
Yeah.
But I saw it flickering in your eyes, so I'm glad you just expressed it. Good. Okay.
I feel better, thanks.
I do too. What else? Yeah.
When you were talking about neuroplasticity, one of the maybe parallel areas of I think cognitive science that I'm very interested in is this idea of implicit bias, and so this idea of implicit racial bias, gender bias, and the ways in which our brains make automatic associations when we meet people for the first time without us even being aware of it. And I'm curious whether the meditative practice, what implications it might have for collectively, perhaps, the way, being able to better manage implicit biases.
I'm really impressed by that question. It's something I've been thinking about a lot, and there's not research yet on it, but it makes so much sense that if you teach people meditation, that kind of automatic reactivity would slow down. So they did a study on own race bias where they showed them photos, right, and then you can recognize better the people from your own race, and it's something they found. And I was looking at this study, and they were using positive and negative and stress emotions to see if that had an impact. And when people were stressed, the own race bias was even stronger. And when they were triggered for a positive mood, it was less strong. And I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to do a study with mindfulness and to see if people, after an 8-week course in mindfulness, that some type of stereotyping was less strong than another. So I think there's huge implications there, and no one's really touched that field of research. So if you want to, get on it. Yeah, great question, really important. So maybe we have time for one more. Yeah.
So hi, I'm Shivani. I'm one of the meditation teachers here at law
great.
school. One of the things that I come up with a lot, this is so fascinating. I know you guys did studies with Tibetan lamas and things like that. One of the challenges of bringing mindfulness into the workplace, for example, is the fact that the most well-developed meditation traditions also come from a specific spiritual and cultural context.
Mm.
What do you think is the way forward where, because like you said, meditation wasn't developed just to make you more efficient at work, or just to fix, these sort of superficial things, and the science hasn't caught up to where some of these ancient wisdom traditions already are. What do you think is the best way of introducing it in a way that doesn't feel like you're just putting this whole legacy that comes from a different culture?
Yeah, it's
in
a
this
great
country?
question. It's very important. I think I tried to address it at the beginning, which is to honor where this comes from, which is mindfulness comes from Buddhist roots, but also to recognize the universal capacity that that we all have to be present. That it's kind of an innate human capacity, and it doesn't have anything to do with these spiritual wisdom traditions, while still honoring what they've contributed. I think for me what's most important, and I've really been thinking a lot about this, is for people to have their own personal practice and to have the freedom to set their own intention. So the original intentions of meditation were enlightenment. It was really clear, and it's a strong motivating force, you know, like, I want to become enlightened, I'm giving up all worldly possessions and I'm going into a monastery. That's why I'm sitting here every day. You know, some of my clients, they're sitting here and they're like, why am I sitting here again? And I'm kind of itching and I'd rather do something else. So it's like, well, what brings you alive? What's your intention? Because really, ultimately, all the wisdom traditions say this is about freedom, okay? And so there's degrees of freedom. And right now, maybe it's freedom from, a degree of freedom from anxiety. That's enough if that's what's true for that person. And for someone else, it might be relating better to their daughter. And someone else, it might be becoming more compassionate and becoming a physician that really goes out and helps. And so for me, I don't really place a value judgment on why someone's meditating. Most important is that they know why, and there's some kind of personal vision they have. Yeah. And I appreciate the question, and understanding what mindfulness is. So many people, you know, I feel like the cognitive psychologists in some ways have hijacked it, and it's become this attentional technique.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like then a sniper could be the most extraordinary mindfulness practitioner, right? So really adding in the dimension of the attitudes of compassion, of curiosity, of kindness, I think is essential. Yeah, thank you. So we're just at time. I want to thank you all for your kind attention. Thank you, Jen and Charlie. Really appreciate it. You can reach me at Santa Clara University if you have other questions. And Charlie knows how to get a hold of me too. Thank you.